Hello and welcome. Good morning, good evening, or just plain hello, no matter where you are. We're here today to discuss some of the content for session number 2 for your class, Composition 1, English 103, Section 5005. I'm Mr. Fowler with you once again today, and this week we're going to take a look at that first writing project and go ahead and get you all started with some of the key content that we're going to look at this semester, including some of the content related to our text, Ready Player One. Let's go ahead and take a look at it together. Okay? Here I am again, just popping up in that corner. As you can see, for week 2, the first thing I have posted is a preview/review of what's come before. Now, hopefully, you have, by this point, completed the course orientation walkthrough video. If you still have questions or concerns about anything that was covered in the course orientation video, please make sure that you address that in an email to me, or you just follow up with any questions or additional concerns that you might have. A number of you have already reached out to me regarding our first session and had some questions or concerns about the Dropbox assignment. At this point, I believe I have all of the Dropbox assignments turned in and accounted for, so it does seem as though you have been relatively successful with that endeavor. The other piece of work that you were assigned, or the other assignment that you were responsible for, is right here, the assignments that were focused in the threaded discussion. And as you can see in the threaded discussion page, a number of you have gone ahead and completed the content on the threaded discussion page. One thing that I do want to point out, though, right here, is that each week I discuss the assignment or discussion parameters. And as it says here, I'm going to post a series of discussion questions, probably one per week, with the exception of weeks where we're either peer reviewing or turning a paper in. Try to format your answers to the questions as a single paragraph, and I think all of you did that, with a minimum of 3 sentences. Most paragraphs have between 5 and 8 sentences. A shorter paragraph has between 3 and 4. So keep that in mind. As it says, throughout the week, you'll also be responsible for responding to 2 of your fellow students' posts as well. Maybe asking them a follow-up question or saying, hey, this was really interesting, or I agree with the point that you made, so on and so forth. And then, of course, following up any questions that I might pose to you. This week, I didn't pose any questions to anybody intentionally because I didn't necessarily want to burden you with the extra efforts of checking in on things regularly, but be apprised I might ask a follow-up question, or I might ask for a clarification, which is more typically the case. And let's look at these examples. In discussion 1, there were many examples of really good responses, and they were formatted relatively well. There are a couple of follow-ups from students that I didn't get a chance to check out just yet, but this all looks relatively good so far. A nice, well fleshed out example of what we're talking about. So I did want to make sure that I attended to those main points of review. And as a preview for this week, we're going to take a look at an article, Participatory Cultures, which was loaded for you and available on Desire to Learn. You can find that link in the self-assessment essay project readings, and I've got it uploaded. We're going to take a look at it in just a moment. then we're going to consider the impact of this thing called fandom. And that's very important for understanding the motivations for the character Wade Watts in this book, Ready Player One. And so I'm asking you to follow up on this reading or discussion that we're going to have by answering a few questions. Specifically, I would like to know what you consider to be your own personal fandom. And according to our authors, I want to take a look at how female-specific fandoms are distinct from those of their male counterparts, and why and how that is explained by the authors in the article. Now, that's really critical because Wade's love interest and partner, actual helper throughout the novel, Artemis, is a female character who has a distinct approach to how fandom operates and does or does not include people. Wade's friend H also has a totally different approach to how that character. Of course, if you already know the giveaway here, you're probably understanding why I'm fumbling a little bit. But H has a different approach to fandom as well. Say it like that. Okay. Then I want to take a look at the first project and help you sort of build toward the ideas for the self-assessment essay, our first project. Now that's going to be due in February, right around February 8th for a draft, and then February 12th for a final edition. So that's coming up relatively quickly. And then, of course, for next time, between now and next week, prepare any questions or concerns that you might have regarding the self-assessment essay. And we're going to have an opportunity to write about that and provide some feedback for that occasion. Okay. Now, I'm going to stop share for a minute. That should be it for our preview and review. I went through that a little bit more quickly than in 10 minutes. So let's make hay while the sun's shining, as they say. I'm going to cut out my video, but you should still be able to hear me as I'm talking you through the session. It's just not going to be necessary for you to see me as much as it is for you to hear me. All right, I'm still here. Let's go ahead and share that screen back. So the first thing I want to do is gravitate toward the article Participatory Cultures. So to do that, and again, this is part of the review, I'm going to navigate to the course content tab. So you don't get a course admin, so it'd be the 1, 2, 3, third tab from the left-hand side. And there under course content, we've got the readings and videos assigned with this content. We also have course readings available here so that you can find fandom and participatory culture right away. I've already got it loaded up, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So this article, Fandom and Participatory Culture, comes to us from Grinnell College, and the theorists whose work we're going to be looking at today include Henry Jenkins, Jolly Jensen, and Matt Hills. And if you want to delve deeper into this topic, there is a whole tab dedicated to the media and the significant scholarship that this article calls upon. This is essentially its works cited page. Now, this is a long article, and I've gone ahead and cropped it here so that you can see it's about 3,000 words, much shorter than anything I'll be asking you to write about during this semester. Still, it's a nice way to kind of compare what I'm asking you to write about and the, oops, sorry about that. What I'm asking you to write about and the kind of content that a professional group of scholars might make or might be called upon to generate. I'm going to skip ahead real quick to show you that I did include a works cited page for this site. And you can see that this is formatted in NLA style. So if you have some questions or concerns about NLA, I have a link to various resources, including the resource that generated this citation, which is bibme, bibme.org, O-R-G. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is a really nice, easy to use interface that acts just like Citation Machine or any other service that you might be interested in using to help you generate effective and correct citations for an MLA style paper. They also include APA and Chicago style citations if you have any instructors who are calling on those methods for the semester. Okay, so what is fandom? Well, fandom is another word for fan culture, which again is a big part of our novel for this semester, Ready Player One. And it's a term which describes communities communities built around a shared enjoyment of an aspect of popular culture, such as books, movies, TV shows, bands, sports or sports teams, and other such fare. So, if we're going back and considering our questions for a moment, so I shrink this down for a minute and go back to my page here. And we're looking at our course homepage for today. And we're reviewing those three questions. How does the article define fandom? How does it define participatory culture? Well, right here. Fandom is, or fan culture is described as a term relating to communities built around a shared enjoyment of an aspect of popular culture, such as books, movies, TV shows, bands, sports, or sports teams. So your particular fan culture could be numerous. It could be multifaceted. For example, I am a fan of most Chicago sports teams. So the Bulls, the Bears, the Blackhawks, the Cubs, yes, even the White Sox too, would all fall under the purview of my Chicago fandom. Now, I follow the Bears mostly, but obviously in the 90s when Jordan was playing the Bulls, that was an event that got the entire state and probably, to be honest, the world interested in the fate of Chicago sports. Even more recently, when the Cubs had their World Series run in 2016, I believe it was, that was a type of a story, a fandom story that captivated most of the United States and the world, especially since the Cubs had taken it on the chin historically for such a long time. But beyond the sports culture, beyond the sports fandom that I enjoy, I was always a fan of comic books, specifically the Marvel comic book character Captain America. Not because I felt any sort of great sense of patriotism or anything like that. It's simply what my brothers were interested in collecting. That may have been due to the fact that in 1967, when the series got into full swing, my dad had just finished his stint in the United States Army and had returned home in 1964. So, my brothers were about 5 and 6 years old. They're just starting to read. So a soldier type of hero probably was very appealing to them, sort of like their dad, right? Who's suddenly back in their lives. I think that I just inherited that fandom because of what was available to me. So it's not like I have any great association with Captain America beyond what was extant and available to me as a young person growing up. A lot of people find that they have a heroic character or group of characters that they gravitate toward for all sorts of reasons. But fan cultures that grow up around those characters or around those sports figures, or if you're like my nephew, he's kind of a fan of scientists. So he knows all sorts of little tidbits and facts about people like Madame Curie and Albert Einstein because he wants to be a scientist. He wants someday to work for NASA, which I hope is something he's able to accomplish. But the fact of the matter is, his fandom is a science-based fandom. And that would include all sorts of scientists. Perhaps Neil deGrasse Tyson would be a good example, or even someone like Bill Nye, that a lot of people in society gravitate toward as science fans or fans of science. Interestingly, some of the characters, or not characters, some of these scientists like Carrie Byron and the guys who are whose names I can't remember, who are the hosts of Mythbusters. Um, those would also be examples of the same sort of same tort. Try again, Mr. Fowler. Same sort of fan communities and fan cultures. Now, your fan culture could be something completely different. I've often found all sorts of students who have a variety of fans. Um, there is a fandom that has grown up around people like Ray Drummond, the so-called pioneer woman who is a cooking expert, or Rachel Ray, or Martha Stewart. Right? There's a fandom of homemaking and cook and crockery or something like that. However you want to define it, that is a fan base. Right? My mom's a big fan of all of those characters. So again, I'm slipping into that usage of character. All of those professionals who do something that she's in, they're operating in a field that she's interested in. And it's fine if your fandom is a little bit more unique. I had a student one time who was a fan of hooping. Hooping, yeah, that's right. I'm not sure if you know what that is, or perhaps if any of you are also fans of hooping, but she was a very talented young woman who was a fan of hula hooping. Yeah, they would actually have hula hooping conventions that she would drive around the United States to attend. And I guess she was a very talented expert in terms of hula hooping. And she would perform, and she had like different costumes and so on and so forth. And she said it's very embarrassing to explain to people when she first meets them, but it was a very interesting experience for her to participate in these kinds of conventions. And she made videos, and they're on TikTok, and I think there are a couple of videos on Instagram and so on and so forth. So she was really into this. But if that's what you yearn for, if that's what you're looking for in terms of a fandom, a fan family, that may be what scratches that particular itch, metaphorically speaking. So in a more broad sense, as it says here, participatory cultures involve fans acting not only as consumers, but also as producers and creators of some form of media. Though most fan cultures, including sports fans and fans of music groups, it's another huge and diverse fandom of culture that we haven't touched on yet, have elements of participatory culture. Media fandom in particular encourages creative expression and artistic production by its participants. And Jenkins gives us a handy list of of traits that defines a participatory culture more specifically. So we have relatively low barriers to artistic expression and civic engagement, strong support for creating and sharing one's creations with others, some type of informal mentorship in which most or more experienced members pass along knowledge to novices. Members who believe their contributions matter, and members who feel some degree of social connection to one another and care about their opinions and contributions to the larger fandom. These creations and artistic expressions can take the form of fiction or short stories, fan art, fan videos, cosplay, right? This is where people dress up like stormtroopers and so on and other things. Folk songs, which is a folk type song inspired by science fiction or other fantastic elements, and other interactions with a person, a group, or a fictional universe. Okay. Yeah, as it says here, folk songs. Before I read this article for the first time a few years ago, I had no idea what folk songs were, but they're a type of folk music with science fiction, fantasy, or other fictional universes as the primary subject. Now, a lot of people suggest that modern fan culture originated with Star Trek fandom in the 60s after the series ended. There are some people who believe that this actually goes back to the 1930s and even have produced some visual evidence of people dressing up like science fiction, fantasy characters inspired by the work of people like the gentleman who published his famous Monsters of Filmland and the science fiction conventions of the early 30s. But these, I think, even though they're good examples of this sort of thing, are really stretching the parameters to qualify for fandom, because they weren't en masse and they weren't planned. They were just sort of these things that happened at these conventions. But modern fan culture, I think, has a strong anchor to Star Trek and the fandom that these authors are suggesting. And as it says here, at the time, fans generally spread their creations through fanzines or conventions. Fanzine, of course, is just a rudimentary publication discussing various aspects of a fictional fandom, usually. What I'm more interested in here is the distinction between participatory culture with consumer culture. So fans do poach things from popular media, but they appropriate the ideas from the text and then reread them for their own uses. As it says here, one theory of popular culture holds that the corporate or culture industry, media producers like the TV networks that air these things and film studios that help create these films, prioritize profit versus quality. Okay, and that slowly popular culture becomes a way to ensure hegemony, or to spread dominant ideologies to represent the world as they see it. But the theory of participatory culture is quite different. In the theory of participatory culture, there's a suggestion that rather than being a dupe or just consumer, media fans are understood as active producers and manipulators of meaning. Fan interaction with media becomes a social activity, and this process allows fans to build their own communities in which they can express themselves. In doing so, they create spaces where they can create and critique prescriptive ideas of things like gender, sexuality, and other norms promoted in part of the media industry. One of the things I'm going to pause and reference here would be the way in which traditional norms like sports fandom have changed significantly. We all remember ideas that or visuals that pop into our mind of a guy who's painted half red and half blue, for example, with a multicolored wig of the same sense, braving the cold and bearing his chest, even though we might not always want to see that sort of thing, in support of his team. But we've gradually gone from that sort of idealized superfan to a more accepting and wider range of fans. We have wives, daughters who participate in fandom by wearing jerseys either emblazoned in the same fashion or in more so-called feminine appropriate colors like pink or orange or something like that. I don't know that orange is particularly feminine, but again, these are prescriptive adjectives that I'm not giving to these items, but that other people have associated with traditionally. So when you see these sort of changes, or I guess you could call them improvements if you feel like that, to the fandom, there's a sense of greater inclusiveness, so that you could be a female fan, but also you could express yourself in a creative way. I've seen on the local high school level, moms, sisters, other people getting creative. They with their banners that they show up with at games. Some of them are very intricately bedazzled. They're very personable. And when I see that going on in the larger culture of sports, as opposed perhaps to something like, the Captain America movies, I get a sense of fulfillment personally when I see that sort of thing. Because if you think about it, if you look at the daily barrage of news that we're subject to, there's a lot of unpleasantness, a lot of ugliness, even, that we're subjected to as part of our daily diet. Part of our psychology each and every day is bombarded by the latest, crime statistics or political, dissension, and or especially in the year of the outbreak here, the latest updates of death tolls, things like that, due to COVID. These things kind of create a negative and stressful tension on our minds, even if we become inured to them. As part of practice, we become desensitized to the consistent bombardment. But in media, we always have a sports break. We always have the sports pages in our papers. And one of the things that I think is wonderful about why people turn to sports, and why there are so many sports metaphors in society, and why there's such an emphasis on that sort of thing, is that you get to see humans achieving things. It's a celebration of what we can do, especially if we work together and we pool our efforts toward one unanimous goal. Your sports team in particular might not always be successful. My Chicago Bears, of course, got bumped out right away. The wild card chase, and that was it. Just today, as I'm recording this, the Packers went down. So now it looks like a Mahomes-Brady matchup. At least that's what it looked like when I went to record this. So it's not always our team, not always the people that we want to succeed, but it is success. Somebody gets to taste the fruit of victory. And we want, or we should want, to sort of see that success fulfilled. And that, again, is why I think sports fandom in particular is a healthy expression of who we are and a part of our lives as we decide to churn for and yearn for something better than the world around us. And that's the case of our character, Wade Watts, in the book Ready Player One. He is a fan who is looking for a way to turn his fandom, to turn his expertise into something positive. And as he enters this game, this quest, to find the magic keys that unlock the gates toward a more successful, a more beneficial world, we as a reader become a fan of him. Or if Klein's writing works for you, we become a fan of Wade Watson. We want to see him succeed. Okay. Now, Jenkins also theorizes that participatory culture can be a form of resistance to typical media and gender and sexual stereotypes. And Ernest Cline certainly promotes those same ideals in his novel. More specifically, he gives us an example, citing that fan fiction, fan videos, and folk songs will explore themes and aspects of the source material which are of interest to perhaps more female-dominated parts of fan communities, going beyond the stories that male-dominated media industry is interested in or willing to tell. That's just something that we have also seen as a trend as things have opened up a little bit more, and we heard a range of more diverse and sophisticated voices being introduced and retelling or reclaiming narratives that may have been neglected or pushed to the side for a time for one reason or other. Ernest Cline explores this same theme in his book, asking at one point why a female character or a female avatar could not be a selectable choice for a particular playthrough. So I think there are some interesting things sort of bubbling under the surface of what might initially feel like a traditional action narrative. We shall see. Now, they go on to talk about geek hierarchies in the article and how some people feel that the levels of engagements make someone, I don't know, more acceptable or less perhaps within the hierarchy of a particular fandom. That's kind of interesting, but I'm going to skip ahead to this next question because I feel that it's very interesting and it is a section that you can use or that you might be able even to cite as part of an answer for this week's discussion question. Participation and fan culture is often gendered, and given a fan's activity's place in internal hierarchies is often correlated to the gender of the participants. For example, the vast majority of fan fiction writers are women. In fact, if you're familiar with the 50 Shades of Grey novels, those novels began as fan fiction based on Twilight, the Twilight series. So, hey, who knows? Maybe your fan fiction can turn you into an overnight celebrity as well. Generally, more transformative activities, things like creating fan fiction and art, videos, etc., are associated more strongly with female fans. Now, conversely, more curative or affirmational activities like memorizing trivia or statistics or collecting and displaying merchandise tend to be more associated with male fans. Now, though the two types of activity are not mutually exclusive, and though people of all genders engage in any given form of activity, the gendered stereotypes associated with each type of fandom is reflected in whether those who engage in those activities are treated as so-called serious fans. Jenkins writes that, quote, the largely female composition of media fandom reflects a historical split with the science fiction fan community between traditionally male-dominated literary fans and the newer, more feminine style of media fandom. This split is reflective in the creative output produced by primarily female fans. Fan fiction often brings female experiences into source texts, which are generally written by and often about men, challenging norms of gender and sexuality. Now, when we get to the introduction of Artemis, in this piece, I think it's going to be relatively obvious that she is a fan who is a little bit more interested in this idea of challenging gender norms and sexuality. And she stands as one of the most recent types of female characters in a long line of new female characters who aren't afraid to ask questions about why they may be relegated to one kind of role or another and challenging those assumptions. And I think that's a healthy expression within the larger sort of fandom as we see and understand it today. Okay. So, a little bit more, I think, here. Yeah. They go on to talk about fandom as a consumer culture. And this is where author Matt Hills kind of puts in his 2 cents, suggesting that there's an interplay between production and consumerisms that fan cultures criticize. Although fandoms can be bifurcated or split into participants who view a moral dualism of good fandom versus bad consumption, he argues for a less divided classification of fan culture. He says, furthermore, several different fan cultures have turned those who subscribe to traditional workings of capitalism into the other. People who buy too many items automatically lose authenticity by contributing to structures that align too strongly with dominant capitalist society, therefore alienating themselves from supposedly more committed fans. There's also a strain of fans who say that we are presented with a view of fans as specialist consumers whose fandom is expressed through the fact that they keep up with the newest release of books, comics, and videos. So fans must perpetually occupy a space in which they carve out their own unique identity, separate from conventional consumerism, but where they also bolster their credibility with a particular collector's items. All right. Now, that's particularly important to our central character, Wade Watts, because Wade Watts is someone who doesn't have the fiscal means, he doesn't have the ducats, in other words, to make himself appear as a super fan. He has to scrounge, he has to skimp and save and use his wiles in order to become a successful fan. So interestingly, as the book begins, one of the things that separates Wade is his encyclopedic knowledge of the Oasis's creator, James Halliday. And that sets him apart and makes his form of fandom that much more distinct from those of his fellow players. And that may be, I don't want to spoil it for you, but that may be what ultimately gives him an edge in this contest. Now, I've mentioned and I've showed you this book a couple of different times here, Ready Player One. I know a lot of you have probably, at least I hope a lot of you, have probably seen the Spielberg film adaptation. And I'm going to tell you honestly, right here in the, well, pretty close to the beginning, but the second video, the first one we're talking about the course content, that is okay. You need to be cautious though, because there is a ton of stuff that happens in the book, and there's a lot of differences in this initial text and its film adaptation. Now, that's not to say that you can't get the basics of the story in the film by watching the film, but it's far from the entire story. So I do hope that you don't neglect reading the text and that you watch the film as a supplement. But I think the film is wonderful, and it can't hurt you to watch the film. And if you've already seen the film, even if it's been a while since you saw it and you want to revisit it, that's okay with me. But just be prepared for the fact that while watching the film might help you with some elements of the course, it's not going to fulfill the complete desire that you may have for understanding the complexity of the novel and the assignments that are associated with it. Speaking of which, we should get to those right away. Let's go ahead and share the screen again. And I want to share with you on the home page a link to the discussion or the first assignment discussion and rubric that pops up here, which of course is the self-assessment essay. Because I would like you to take a little bit of time at the end of today's session or sometime this week to start writing the self-assessment essay. Start kind of composing the ideas. So again, I'm going to go to the course content link. And I'm going to start with the self-assessment essay. And right away, self-assessment essay 1 is our first article. And I'll see if I can stop this for just 1 second. You don't need to see me while we're doing this. There you go. Isn't that better? You don't have to worry about where I'm at on this page. So again, you can look at this document on this screen, or if you wish to print a copy, because I know sometimes it's nice to have a physical reference, you can click the download button. And if you have a printer, you can print the essay. You can also expand the page using this grid here. And then you have a full-sized version of the essay. Let's look at some of the basics. The self-assessment essay is worth about 7% of your overall grade. And point-wise, it's valued at 25 points, I believe. Or 50 total when you add the rough draft and the final draft together. So I had the dates a little bit wrong. I apologize for that. That's why we're going over the rubric, so I can make sure that I don't have errors. So the draft is not due until the 12th of February, and then the final due at the end of the month on the 26th, or just about the end of the month. It is about 500 words or more, sorry, which is equivalent to 2 pages. Now, how many words appear on that second page is debatable. But rather than saying, oh, it's 1 1/3 of a page or 1.5 or something like that, I just round up. Okay, understand that I round up. And technically, I'm not even supposed to give you the amount of pages that I expect because we want to focus on the number of words. Now, this is a decision made by the state of Illinois and honored by Kishwaukee and honored by Rock Valley and any other, university or college system in Illinois, focusing on by the word count, in this case 500 words, over the number of pages. But students often aren't comfortable with counting words. They're more comfortable with a round idea of number of pages. So that's why I give both versions. Now, I did post an announcement, and it's still viable and available in the announcements section of Desire to Learn about how to properly format an MLA document. But generally speaking, the format for this paper will be for you to use a size 12 Times New Roman theme font. And then in the upper left-hand corner of the paper, in a single-spaced list of 4 lines, you're going to include your name, the class, the name of the assignment, in this case, self-assessment essay, and the date it's turned in, which should be, again, either February 12th or for the final draft, February 26th. Now, with the exception of that 4-line list, the rest of the document should be double-spaced, and you should include page numbers in the upper right-hand corner. Try to submit your assignment in Microsoft Word or rich text format. Please do not submit pages in dot pages or Google Docs. Dot pages is something that doesn't work in Desire to Learn. It won't download for me. So if you do that, it's fruitless because I'm never going to be able to download that. Google Docs format, you can do it if it's an emergency situation. But make sure that you give me enough time to view the information if you're going to share it vis-a-vis Google Docs. Now, for guidelines and examples to format this or other assignments, please consult the formatting guidelines document it says course resources, but it's actually in the announcements section. Now, the submission of essays that are entirely or partially plagiarized in this course will result in an automatic 0. So, don't do that. You are in college now. You're paying for the experience. You're paying to learn. Don't waste your own time and money by turning in a plagiarized assignment. It's, I don't like to dwell on the negative, but plagiarized assignments, unfortunately, are very obvious. Even if you don't use software, they're really obvious. And we're required here at KISS to run them through our software. So don't do that. I don't want to have an uncomfortable discussion with you about what your fandom is or something like that. How ridiculous would that be? Okay, what is it that I'm actually asking you to do? Well, this is another reason why you shouldn't plagiarize, because this first essay is a narrative, which means it's a story that's all about you. That it means also you can use for this first essay the I voice, the first person perspective. So what I'm asking you to do here is to compose an essay that describes how your academic and writing strengths will help you succeed in this course. But I also want you to describe your academic and writing challenges and how they may present obstacles. Now, when you discuss the obstacles, I want you to reflect on those issues and then try to include a strategy that you can use to overcome them this semester. You should support your ideas with specific examples, if you can, along with information from the course syllabus. For example, you might want to identify a specific essay assignment you expect to do well in and explain why you're going to be a success. You may also want to describe the source of your academic writing and or strengths and weaknesses. In other words, you might want to tell the story of how you acquired that useful skill or developed a bad habit. Feel free to incorporate any strategies you already know into this essay too. For example, if you want to write a formally structured persuasive essay, you can do that. Alternatively, you may wish to structure your essay as a narrative, which is what I suggest, and just tell the story of how you acquired your strengths and weaknesses. Now, the purpose behind the essay is multifaceted. Most importantly, it gives me an opportunity to see how you write and to reflect on your literacy and writing skills. This helps me get a sense of your authorial voice and tells me what writing skills that you may need to focus on, either as an individual or as a class, and will help me tailor the grammatical components that will be contained in 103 in the coming weeks. And then maybe just avoid those skills which it's clear that you've already mastered. So for example, if you don't write fragments, I'm not going to worry too much about emphasizing fragments in our grammar portions. It also gives you an opportunity to explore the course requirements and make plans to meet those requirements that involves drawing on your already positive strengths and creating some realistic strategies to overcome difficulties and challenges. Now, the essay is going to be completed sort of during class time in a somewhat timed environment. But for direct assistance, planning and preparing this essay, of course, you can arrange for a Zoom meeting or other meeting with myself, or you can meet with a writing specialist in tutoring services. I am tutoring specifically this semester on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 a.m. to 12:30 in the afternoon. So that may be a good chance for us to meet and connect. Okay, so that's really it for today's session. I hope that your time this week is productive, and I'll be zooming in a little bit later this week with some information on grammar and a basic primer about how to avoid fragments and create good compound sentences that you can use in your writing, and how to identify and correct these issues if they occur in your writing or in the writing of others, especially as we get ready to think forwardly about the peer review sessions for this course. Okay, like I said, that's it for Mr. Fowler for this week. I hope you found this video instructive and helpful, and until then, think critically and do your best. All right. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.